Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon for you joining me. Thanks very much for your time, and welcome to another edition of the Tanya explanation. Today is a very hot day here up in north of England, let's get started. So, the Alter Rebbe continues the discussion initiated in chapter 1 of ways of arousing joy, counteract feelings of sadness generated by introspection of one's spiritual failings. This chapter commences by explaining how one's soul can reach true joy by way of its purification and illumination of gladness of the heart. This can be achieved by thinking deeply and using one's intellect to understand God's unity. True unity means not only that there is one God, one Creator, but that furthermore God is the only existing being. Nothing truly exists outside of him. Allow him or her to consider how he permeates all worlds, both up and lower, how even this world is filled with his glory, and everything is of no reality whatsoever in his presence. This refers to the divine life force, which encompasses all worlds and which animates them as if from above, without adapting itself to a particular nature of each created beings. It describes Hashem's aloneness, akin prior to the creation, and afterwards he fills all space, but the same is true now as then, with no changes, as the existence is nothing before him. The concept of letters being nullified within their source, being analogous to all created beings being nullified before God. There are no letters until a thought arises of them, which also closes them. Thought clothing the letters. Now, my first lesson in the Tanya many years ago thinks about a further analogy within the physical world, that the sun's rays being nullified within its source. And by nullifying its source, it's not known as the rays, because it's still united with its source, the sun. It can only be called the sun. These analogies lend to a true meaning of God's unity, that He alone exists, and there's nothing besides Him. Now, one contemplates deeply and at length on this matter of God's true unity. His or her heart will rejoice with his faith. The soul will be gladdened by it to the point of rejoicing and singing with all of his or her heart and might. A happy consequence of this is that when it fills one's mind, it makes a closeness experience with Hashem. And this is the purpose of a person of creating a dwelling place for God in this world, as we explained in chapter 36 at length. An analogy of a common person being close to a king of flesh and blood, in the commonest home rather than the king's palace. How much infinitely more was one to rejoice in the closeness of the King of Kings, the Holy and Blessed be He, and in his dwelling together with man in this physical world. This special and privileged ability to experience being absorbed in God's unity, it was instituted by the sages that one should render praise and thanks to God's name each morning, saying, Ashreinu Ma'atov Chalkeinu, Nemaya for you Susenu. How fortunate are we, how good is our portion, how pleasant is our lot, and how beautiful our heritage. Just as a person rejoices at the immense fortune which one inherits through no toil of their own, similarly and infinitely more so, ought we to rejoice over the inheritance of our forefathers' bequest to us of the true unity of God described to an extent above. This is the meaning of what our rabbis of best memory said 613 mitzvot were given to Israel, came Habakkuk and based them all on a single one, faith. As this is written, as Tzaddik lives by his faith. This means it is as if all the mitzvot constitute of this one mitzvah, faith alone. For through faith one comes to fulfill all the 630 mitzvot. For thereby, through one's faith in God's unity, the Sitra Achad is subdued, and darkness is transformed into light, meaning that the darkness of the Klipot of this corporal world, which obscure and conceal God's light until the end of days, as it is written, and He sets an end to darkness. Thus, when a Jew in diaspora is pervaded with an awareness of God's unity, his joy is all the greater. It follows too that the more lonely a spiritual position, the greater divine joy when he acquires the awareness of God's unity. As we have seen so far, then that one's faith in God's unity leads him to twofold joy in his closeness to God, and joy in the knowledge that his faith brings joy to God. God's joy is a fusion of his plurality, is around when through his faith in God's unity, the Kali product transformed to light, and they become a private domain and a unified realm for God's unity. I hope this makes sense, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the chat and feel free to subscribe. Wish you a very good day, all the best, stay cool, bye.